Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I have a really bright and colorful daffodil painting to share with you, and I wanted to let you know that I am running a sale at my Teachable School this weekend. If you use the coupon code LUCKY4U, you can get 40% off the class of your choice. I will put that information in the video description. It's a St. Patrick's Day sale, and the sale will end on Monday. I believe that's the 18th, but I'll put all the information in the video description for you. I went and found some daffodil photos on Unsplash. I just found like a bouquet of daffodils, just so I'd have something to kind of go by. And I wanted to make use of some pens that I recently had filled up with Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiance watercolor, liquid watercolor, which is kind of like a dye. And the reason I wanted to use those was because they're fun and I want to use my fountain pens frequently so they don't dry up. And look at these little shark pens. They're just so cute. And so I'm just kind of sketching with these pens. I know that I'll be able to kind of wash them away with water, and that way I won't have any pencil lines that I have to deal with later if I decide I don't like them. So it's a great way to sketch and be a little non-committed about it, but it also gives you a really cool look. So I basically drew the middle parts of the daffodils with the orange ink in the orange pen, and the outside petals, the white petals, with that blue that kind of has a bit of a turquoise ink in it. So I don't know, I figured that would look a little bit better drawing something white. And I didn't have too much of an idea of what I wanted to do exactly, so I knew I wanted it to be kind of loose and flowy, so I just started by flicking on some water onto the paper. And I love how it made the lines from that watercolor ink just kind of spread around. I know I wanted to have some of the white background showing, so I just kind of went in and wet some areas where I wanted the paint to kind of flow. And I did a combination of dripping in paint and flicking it on to get that pretty ephemeral effect. The hardest part about this painting was deciding when to stop and where I wanted to leave white space and what colors to use. I felt kind of like, I don't know, like I was trying to drive on a slippery road for a lot of this painting, but it was a good challenge and it was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. I didn't even attempt to narrate this as I was painting because I just needed to focus really and kind of use my intuition as to what colors I wanted where. I love to use a blue and orange kind of color combination. They're opposites, so they make each other pop a little bit more, and I love those like kind of peachy reds and like the kind of corally reds with tealy blues. I think they go together really well. I propped up my painting a bit because sometimes when you're painting, especially when you have some really wet areas on your painting, it'll glare a lot with the light. So just tipping it up at an angle was really helpful. And I'm really loving how the painting is at this stage, and honestly I was kind of afraid I was going to mess it up. At one point I actually took a photo. I think it was just about this stage, maybe a little bit later, and I was just wanted to remember it in case it all like went downhill. I went back in with my pen and drew some veining on that little kind of like cup area of the daffodil, and that worked out really well too. I'm having a lot of fun with my fountain pens. The ones that I'm using here are mainly Jinhao Sharks, and I got a pack of 12 on Amazon for $18 or $19, and I put Dr. P.H. Martin Radiant ink in there, and they've been so much fun to sketch with. And they work great for like scratching back instead of a credit card scraper too, because then you can deposit a little ink while you're at it. And hopefully this doesn't do anything bad to my pens, but they were pretty inexpensive, so I'm not going to feel too precious about them. I'm just going to use them and play with them and see what I can do, basically. And I think it's nice to have supplies that perform well but aren't so precious that you have to worry about them. And like these watercolors, these are not very expensive considering they're a professional watercolor. I think they go for around $50 for the set of 24, and I know there's a coupon, or at least there was a coupon at the time I'm filming this anyway, for like another 10% off. So yeah, get supplies that are good, that will do the job, that you're not going to feel too precious about using. So with the centers of the flowers, I wanted that kind of reddish corally orange to the outside, and then it to fade into a yellow, and then have a little bit of like a May green on the inside, because it seems like where the center of the flower, kind of like where it would attach to the stem, that's where you'd get that kind of green. And I think that's a really nice gradient of color too. I'm starting with the centers of all these flowers because I don't know, I guess it felt a little bit safer that way to go for my darkest, more intense colors first, and then I've got some white of the paper, and then basically just kind of try to fill in and see where I wanted to go from there. And I love the color of the liquid watercolor I have in these pens. Now, when I say liquid watercolor, I want to just reiterate that I'm using the Radiance or the Spectralite Dr. P.H. Martin liquid watercolors and not the Hydrus, because I think the Hydrus pigment particles would clog these pens. These are kind of like a dye-based watercolor in the pens, so I just wanted to let you know that. Fountain pens can be a little finicky as far as what kind of ink you can put in there, and you can damage them if you put the wrong kind in. This is not fountain pen ink that I'm using. It is a liquid watercolor, but I just wanted to make sure that that was really clear, because I know like the Dr. P.H. Martin Hydrus watercolors are kind of thick. They're pigment based and they are kind of chunky. What I like about that though is these watercolors have quite a lovely color payout when you add the water to them. And then I was just taking some of the like the peacock blue kind of color from I think they actually call it with transparent turquoise or something, and added that into the deepest area of the flower right next to the cone center, and just kind of let it blur out a bit. And yeah, this is kind of like a balancing act the whole time. Like, how much color do I want to use? How much detail do I want to use? I don't want to overdo it because I want to keep that light and loose feeling, but I want to do it enough that it feels like it's done. So, I mean, like at this point, I'm looking at it back and I really like the painting at this point too. It's like, oh, this is really pretty. But it's so hard to tell because this clearly does not feel finished to me, but there's so many parts about it that I really like. Maybe I should have done some small studies on like postcards or something just to get the feel for it, but I really just wanted to go in. This is one of my favorite papers. This is Arches 140 pound cold press 100% cotton watercolor paper. I really like that. I also like the Meaden has a cotton watercolor paper block that's really nice too, much more affordable if you're looking for another option. But I find those two very similar, to be honest. But yeah, I had just worked on Arches a few days ago, and I'm like, oh, this block is still out. I'm going to go ahead and use it. And here you can see I'm gently putting in that corally pink color towards the edge and just kind of letting it fade in. And that one up in the corner up top, that one, it had some moments of greatness and had some moments of a hot mess, and enjoy it now because it's going to be drastically changed in a little bit. And just kind of going back in with the pens and adding to it. And I found some older fountain pens that I had that actually did not work that great for me. They were also by Jinhao. The Sharks wrote so smoothly, but these older pens that I had were very hit or miss. And I don't know if I didn't load them up correctly when I first got them because they're working better now. But I did put some brown ink in that one, and I was going through and just adding the stamens with that fountain pen ink because I was going on damp paper and I knew the ink would fuzz, and that would give me that look of the fuzzy stamens in the flower there. So I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and use that quality and take it easy, right? Make it, if a technique is easy and it works, just do it, right? Why complicate it? So because I wasn't feeling as precious about this little flower that was up in the corner, which I've turned my paper around upside down, by the way, I decided I would kind of work on this one first with some darker colors and see what I thought. And I've got to say that after putting those darker colors in there, I was not very happy with it. I mean, it looks all right, but it was, I don't know. I felt like the petals were kind of like cattywampus, and I didn't really see how off they were until I started to put those colors in there. It's like I have the center of the flower facing one way, but the petals don't seem to agree with it. And so it was kind of giving me a little bit of grief. But anyway, I'm still persevering and adding some colors because at this point I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do up in this corner, but this is not the focal point of the picture. I want to just kind of mess around with some colors and see how it blends and see what I like and what I dislike, and then get a good idea about what I might want to do with the flowers that I really like in the painting, the more focal point areas. I think my focal point of the painting is probably that middle flower towards the left. I really love how the center cone in that daffodil is looking. And honestly, I kind of got it to that point and I decided not to mess with it too much. I did very little to that section of the flower because it was really coming along nicely and I didn't want to lose that freshness. And I felt like I lost the freshness in that flower up high, and I felt like I was kind of in danger of losing the freshness on the one to the bottom right a lot during this. So it was definitely it was definitely like a balancing act throughout this whole painting to get the feeling that I wanted to get in this painting and not overwork it, but also make it look finished, because I'm not an abstract painter. I do like to have some ethereal elements. I like to have some things go a little squishy at the edges and get a little like fadey at the edges, and have that bit of a loose to tight mix in a painting, but I'm not an abstract painter. And I was finding it challenging to find that balance of where I've got some detail. I've got enough detail that we know what's going on, that I've got my focal point, but we've got enough of the floaty bits that it has the feeling that basically the feeling that I'm trying to paint is the feeling of spring, when spring starts and things are getting warmer and the days are longer. We just had daylight savings, so we put our clocks ahead. And, everything just feels kind of hopeful and bright and light in the spring. And that's what I was trying to convey here. I think it's pretty obvious at that top flower that the cone area is not in agreement with the petals. And I think it's because I wanted to have that flower turned. In my reference photo, all the flowers were turned the other way, and I was kind of turning my phone around to look at the reference photo. Now here, to loosen up, I'm splashing on some color, and I'm blotting off where I don't want the splashes to be. So basically, I want some interesting splashes and splotches to guide the eye around and to add a little interest and to bring in a little bit of color. But I don't want to disrupt certain areas. There's some areas in this painting I really like, and there's some that I don't. And so I'm trying to distract and emphasize. So distract from the boring, ugly parts and emphasize the good parts. And that's, it's a bit of an adventure. And luckily I was in the mood for an adventure when I painted this today. And there's also just kind of enhancing some edges and making some edges go soft and float away. Like I wanted the edges on that flower on the bottom right to be pretty vibrant. And so I added some blurry shadows underneath them. And I wanted to have some of the crinkles in the petals around that flower I'm painting there on the left. That's my favorite flower in this. I wanted to just have a little bit of detail in the outer petals so that it drew the eye into the center cone area. Now, this was kind of tricky here on this bottom flower. I wanted to add more wrinkles. I wanted to get like the crepey texture of the daffodil. And I was, I don't know, I felt like I was kind of overdoing it maybe. And also when I sketched it, I had this kind of little hangy piece of flower there. And of course it's overhanging a white petal. I really couldn't get rid of it after I put it there. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I wish I didn't draw it like that. But I was kind of committed at this point. So I'm just like, well, we're just going to go with it. And I think you just kind of have to go with the flow with this style of painting, because if you try to force something a certain way, it's going to look awkward. You can nudge it a little bit and you can let things fade out a little bit, but you really don't want to force, I think, in this style of painting, because it just looks really unnatural. I'm going back up at that one at the top, but I feel it's getting a little too heavy, and I don't want something that heavy at the top of the painting. So I'm going to have to do something drastic to make that be a little bit more balanced, because I feel like it's sticking out like a sore thumb, like your eye goes right to it because it's the darkest object. So what I did was I grabbed my Daniel Smith watercolor ground, my white watercolor ground, because what this is basically a gritty, gesso-y type material. It will bring you back to like a papery surface. And so I felt like I did not leave enough white, and that's my failing in this painting. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go in and bring some whites back. I started off with a brush, but then I realized that a palette knife was the way to go, because then I can actually make it look like it's on purpose and have some texture in there. And I really like how that gave a little bit more emphasis to these flowers at the bottom. And I was kind of like fussing around with that top one. And then I realized, you know what, I'm just going to scrape some stuff right over that. I don't really like the center of that flower. I feel like I want it to kind of fade away. And so I just said, you know what, we're just going to swipe right over it. And that's what I did with this larger palette knife. And I don't know if I 100% love it, but I made it work. And So typically when you're using this product, you want to let it dry. Like, I think you're supposed to let it dry for like overnight or something. I've never done that. I've been too impatient always. But the thing I love about this is it's like whiteout for your watercolor. And actually I have to say it's kept really well. I bought this jar, gosh, it was before I remember working on a book cover, and the publisher had a big change. Well, not a big change, but I had black watercolor down, and I needed to be able to put something light yellow. And so I'm like, well, I'm not repainting this whole cover. So I got out the watercolor ground. So I had it at least that far ago. And I think that was like 2016. So I purchased it prior to that. And I've had to add some water here and there to thin it down, but it has stayed really well. So that was a Daniel Smith white watercolor ground. I highly recommend that. It just is a do-over, on your watercolor when you get into a situation. Now I'm kind of liking this here where I'm just adding some watercolor over the ground. I did dry the ground. I think I used a heat tool. I know, not recommended, because that's like I think that's an acrylic based product actually. But I wanted to finish this today. And actually right here, I really like it right here. I like that vibrancy of the color, but how it's kind of fading away. But now I'm adding more. I don't know why. I think it's because I really wanted to finish this today, and I was impatient. And so I'm like, yeah, we got to add more. I probably should have taken a break at that point and been like, okay, why don't we come back and see what we think the next day? But hindsight's 2020. We have these great ideas when we look back at the footage. But one thing I did like about this particular edition was that I decided that I wanted to make that shadow, that shape, that kind of almost trapezoid shape in between the three flowers a little more accented. So I wet that and I dribbled in some of that turquoise color, some of the, I had mixed a color with the Quin Magenta and ultramarine blue and a little bit of that turquoise color. I dripped some of that in there, and I think that made a really nice shadow, an interesting color. And since those were really transparent colors, these watercolors are very transparent, which is nice. There's a Naples yellow that's not, but I don't think I didn't use that at all in this painting. So it's a lot easier to avoid mud if you're using transparent color. At this point, I was kind of thinking I might be done, so let's take a quick look at what we've got so far. I thought that was kind of interesting up in the corner. Maybe not exactly what I had planned, but it's all right. The bottom one I still feel is maybe a little bit too bright. Now I'm thinking, is it going to be better this way? Maybe I should just not go with a portrait orientation and turn it every which way. So I looked at it in a bunch of different directions to see what I thought, see if something would be better than something else, and I decided that I was going to go and do a little bit more to this. At this point, I'd say I was probably about 90% done, and I wanted to bring some white back, so I thought some speckling in with some bleed-proof white would work really well. Bleed-proof white is a super opaque white gouache, and I added quite a bit of water to it so I'd be able to flick it on there, and I added those speckles, which I think kind of give it a really light, fresh look. And then I thought, well, I'm going to highlight those crinkles on the bottom flower there. And I was going to do that with the ground, but I couldn't get a thin enough line, so I decided to do that with the bleed-proof white. Now, I will tone that down a bit. I also thought maybe if I brought in some kind of that May green, but added white to it to make it opaque and flick some of that on, that would give me a little bit of a freshness, which I think it did a bit, but I don't know. I also kind of stuck my palette knife in there and kind of stamped it on here or there just to break up some of the darker areas that I wasn't keen about. And I decided that those white highlights were way too bold on the bottom flower, but I did want to keep it kind of light, so I just glazed over that with a little bit of yellow and some of those coral colors that I had mixed just to kind of break it up a little bit. And I'm just doing a little bit of touching up on the stamens and just basically kind of fussing around here and there. And I wanted to give it a quick dry so I could sign my name. And that pretty much does it. Here we're going to take another look at it really close up. I think those white splashes really helped kind of break up some of that really heavy area up top. and I think it's lovely. I'll have to look at my daffodils from last year, because I think I do daffodils every spring this time of year, and I don't know, I just think they're so hopeful and uplifting looking. I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget my sale in my Teachable School. Use the coupon code LUCKY4YOU to save 40% off any class during this St. Patrick's Day weekend. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.